Coming this summer, from the studio that brought you The Nutty Professor and The Santa Claus 3, witness the unforgettable story of one manager and his journey to the top of the coefficient table. Damn it, man, can't you see we're this close to greatness? I just need a few more players. Join Janos Toth on his epic voyage to create the most intricate system of loans ever devised and see what happens when it all goes wrong. I think you're getting addicted to loans, Mr. Toth. I see that look in your eye when the scout reports come back. I'm telling you, there's no good players in Guam. I can quit anytime I want. The loans don't control me. Starring Vin Diesel as Vida Zinha, Anthony Mackie as Fawad Barbasi, Pedro Pascal as Gonzalo Reynoso, and Glenn Powell as Janos Toth. ED7? What are you doing here? I thought you were dead. Mr. Toth, I'm here to speak to you about the Loan Farm Initiative. Building a Nation, Malta. Rated R.
In order to streamline the save a little bit and allow us to cover as many seasons as physically possible before the end of the game cycle, we decided to make a few changes to the way that we formatted things on the streams for this season. So we decided at the beginning of this season that if we or any other Maltese side reached a final of a European competition, it would no longer essentially be allocated its entire own full match stream, as that was taking up a lot of time. So now they would just be played in normal, which means of course that you will no longer get spoilers for things like that in here, because you won't know whether we got to a final or not until the end of the video, or at least that section anyway. I just wanted to put this up front so you didn't feel like you'd missed any finals or anything like that. That's not to say that we or any other Maltese sides did or didn't get to finals during the course of this season. The point is you will find out the entire results over the course of this video, whether we did or not. But speaking of finals, there was the little matter of the Champions League final that we were in last season. So let's talk about it. Yeah, we did the dub yet again, our third Champions League in 4 years. This is a sort of prolific run, and I truly believe that if it wasn't for that one random blip against Liverpool in the previous year, we'd have probably been in 4 consecutive finals and probably would have managed to win all of them, which is an utterly brilliant result for us, particularly as it was 3 different finals against 3 different Spanish sides. We managed to win all of them. Reynoso gave us the lead. Then we added another one through, of course, Facundo Pereira in the nearly the 90th minute to wrap up the win and get us those juicy coefficient points that we kind of needed a lot. But still, great result for us, and we wanted to try to continue that going into this season. So we came into season 26 of Building a Nation with Sirens of Malta off of what can be only described as a fantastic result. But once again, we just had to build. At this stage, it really was just a question of we would need the most insane season from Malta to try to catch England, but you never know what can happen in these type of things. Over the course of this year, of course, a few players were starting to age out of the team, which meant young blood was going to have to be blooded. And that was going to be a difficult opportunity for us because as much as we have those young players, I didn't believe they were entirely ready to step up to those roles. But this year, it was going to be a bit of a transition season for us. And in doing so, we have also spent £175 million on new players over the course of this season, including a couple, frankly, that could be described as the bargain of the century. We've made some unbelievable pickups over the course of this year, both for the first team and for the future, which is unlike me. Despite that, we've still come out with a transfer profit of over £100 million thanks to some of the ridiculous wheeling and dealing I was telling you guys about in the last video, and we have turned that up to not even 11, we're at like 19 now. So let's get to those first before we start talking about some of the ridiculous signings that we and some of the signings that have been made around the league, because there's actually stuff worth talking about there too. Now, I already showed you the Ben Wood sale, I believe, in the last video, but I just wanted to highlight it again as technically it counts as part of this season. So that was a £40 million transfer profit, literally completely free money for us there on a player that's done all right for Arsenal this year, but he was 31. I mean, we just made money on the deal. But anyway, we move. A couple of random ones is that Jimmy Castro, who we'd actually only signed, I think, a year before, has moved to Benfica for nearly £11 million. I've noticed that the Portuguese sides have been willing to drop quite a lot of money on players that I consider to be solid, but not having massive futures for us. And we've been able to make a lot of profit just churning these guys around, basically. Doesn't have to be Benfica. We also did the same thing with John Vargas, this time an Ecuadorian going to Porto for £9 million. Again, these are the kind of guys that we're picking up for like less than £500,000 a lot of the time, and just being able to like 20x our money in sometimes less than a year. I mean, this one's taken a couple, but still. Then a slight failed transfer, and that was the one of Luis Linus. He came from Liverpool for £17 million, did a season on loan at Real Betis, smashed it. We knew he was never going to be able to play for us because he just didn't have the ceiling, so we had to cash in and sell him to Marseille for £11.5 million. So we didn't lose too much on the deal, which is okay. Then there was another of the freebie flips we brought in, signed him out on loan for a year to Sporting, then we're able to sell him to Inter for £12 million. Again, guys that are just never going to play for us might be okay for Inter. It's always worrying when you're strengthening potential rivals, but we're just able to make so much money out of these freebies. It's crazy, and the best ones are yet to come. Another freebie was that of Maxime Dumont, who we'd brought in from PSV Eindhoven. He was out to Etihad as well for £15.2 million. These are signings that are essentially making us so much money, and it's allowing us to sign a lot more players. And you know I love signing players. Then we had Luis Gomez, who I actually had spent little bit of money on from America to Cali, but I sure as shit hadn't spent 17 million pounds, and another player that we've sent to Saudi as well. Like, he's a really good player, but he just wasn't going to get in our team, so more free money. How much did I pay? Oh no, tell a lie, he was free as well. Now we come to probably one of my favourite outs, I would say. This is Oscar Nerlens. You remember we signed him a couple of seasons ago. He's done some reasonable stuff for us in that period, mostly as a backup option. And then basically Benfica came in and said, hey, we'll give you 10 million. And I thought, we've paid 4.1. Do I really want to do that? So I just, on a whim, said, give me 20 up front, and then just left the rest of that in there. They kept coming back with like, oh, we'll give you 11. So I said, no, 20 up front, thinking that eventually they'd compromise and we'd get to about 13 and I'd be happy with that. And then for some reason, I went 20 for the final time, and they just went, yeah, all right then, 20 million up front for this guy. And with some clauses as well, which he will fit into as well, because it's things like getting 10 international caps, which you absolutely do, and 10 more, that is. So 23 million pounds for a player that we paid 4 for. I was over the moon, although we have sort of lost a few centre-backs this year, which has given us a bit of a depth crisis there. Speaking of money, Ludovic Vidal, after 2 loan spells. So he came on a free transfer 2 seasons ago, had loan spells at Ajax and Newcastle, and this time has gone to Al Ahly for 30 million pounds. And now probably my favourite one. I told you about Sam Willoway last season. He joined us on a free transfer from Liverpool. We then loaned him to Newcastle to fill the slot that Ben Wood was taking up because he'd left the club, and now we've sold Sam Willoway to Barcelona for, well, as you can see here, 40 million pounds. So it's another 40 million pound profit nearly just on those 2 guys alone. 80 million just for Ben Wood and Sam Willoway, and they were both free transfers. But there was one more signing away that was even bigger, and that was Robin Ibanez. Now this is one of those ones that was a little bit like almost too good to turn down. 60 million pounds to Inter Milan. Brilliant money. Like, he wasn't starting for us. He'd only played, well, 16 games in sort of 18 months for us, which isn't a great deal really. He was a second string defender for us. He complained that he wanted to leave, and when this opportunity came along and Inter just offered me that money straight up, there was no sort of hesitation. He was only worth, I think, 30 million, but I'd promised them I'd sell him for 57, and then they said, hey, how about 60? And I went, yes. How about yes? But that's all the outs. That, I think, in total came to about 270 million pounds worth of outs, with all sorts of various other ones in there that are like sort of 2-3 million here and there. So we have money to play with now, but there was always time for a meme signing.
There's a player called Taliban.
But now we need to talk about the ins, because there's been a lot of them and some genuine monsters. And this is one of my favorites, honestly. He could be bargain of the century. That wasn't even my intention, but I think his star rating has been upgraded on his PA side of things. So this is Assumption Abile, who's coming from Buffles in Benin. And I basically signed him because I saw him knocking about in their national team squad when he was like 17, which I know it's Benin, but like that still felt like it was a little bit much. So I decided to pick him up on a free transfer, as you do, and upon joining us, he's been upgraded. Look at the value on this guy. I wasn't expecting that. We sign a lot of these guys when they're quite young and get to their national teams, especially in Africa, because you tend to get the cream of the crop rising very fast. Most of them don't turn out to be amazing. He looks like he could be a proper diamond in the rough. He's got 10 goals and 10 assists for Sengleia in the second tier this season. He's the kind of guy that I think could really develop there over a couple of seasons, and I'm really excited about him now, having had a proper look. He was like here. So that's awesome. We also dropped 10 million pounds on Hirotoyo Umeguchi for the main reason that he had fabulous physicals. And the idea was really that he could provide a bit of cover for us at sort of a DM kind of situation, really. That was the idea anyway. And he didn't really get a chance to play for us very often, and essentially has been loaned out to Ajax for the second half of the season. We may end up selling him this summer, but if we do, we could probably still triple X our money on him, so nothing really lost on him, I suppose, if we could find the right deal. Then another of the players that I genuinely consider bargains, like Ignacio Gauto. He joined us. I don't think he had any caps. He was another of these players that I think he was actually a recruitment focus from Sportivo Luqueño over in Paraguay. He now has since got 5 Paraguay caps. His physicals are excellent for someone that's only 19. He's got great tackling, which is the most important thing. His tackling is brilliant. Positioning is amazing. Does have a little bit on the low aggression, which is a bit of a shame, but good bravery. Heading's not amazing, but he's already consistent at 19, which is fabulous. He's done a good job out on loan at Gazira United this season, and that's really, really good. And the fact is, he's worth a stupid amount of money, and I really am starting to take that as the game sort of subtly telling you that this is legitimate potential that he's got and not just sort of fake stars. I still don't even think he's the best bargain in terms of his actual attributes either. Next, I made a slight mistake, and that was to drop 24 million pounds on Robin Brouwer. Now, with us playing Tesco's Express or Tejera last season a lot more, I figured we may need some depth in that position were he to get an injury, and we wanted to pay that a little bit more. The opportunity came up to sign Brouwer from Red Bull Salzburg for 20 million, rising to 24, and I took it. And this is a bit of a miss for me. You can see that he hasn't played a lot and has actually ended up on loan at Benfica. In fact, to tell you a lie, he hasn't actually played at all for us. I think he has played in Europe, weirdly. I think he made a substitute appearance in the Champions League. But either way, you can see that this was a massive miss for me, and it's a lot of money. But we've got the ability to have some misses occasionally, and boy, was that a lot. But next up was an absolute steal for me, and he still isn't the bargain. This is Jose Pugliese, who we brought in from Boca Juniors for, albeit £22.5 million. That's with clauses that rise that up a little bit. Now, he is slightly injury prone, but he has been the ultimate backup striker. And we said last season that we needed a backup because we couldn't seem to find that guy that was going to do the job. Roy wasn't cutting it. Jethro Janga didn't look like he would. Lewis Linus. None of these guys were really it for us. And with Michel Bazama leaving, we needed that guy that could be a solid backup. And you'll see that he was willing to take impact sub squad status as well. And look at his attributes. For £20 million, roughly, he's an Argentinian international. I think he is bloody amazing. So to bring him in as a guy that's willing to play backup to us, he's managed 13 goals for us this season as a backup too. Scored a couple of important ones off the bench for us too. He's just been a fabulous backup player and exactly what we were looking for. That's given us that depth. He's got brilliant physicals. And for me, physicals on these kind of young strikers are so important because you can train the other stuff. Not that we've needed to, because he has 18 finishing, great dribbling. That composure could do with a little bit of work. So I might try and get him on that maybe, or just put him on role training actually, now that he's 22. Now comes the player that I am super excited about. Boom. This is Callum Brooks, a 22-year-old Slovakian international. Yeah, that's right. A Slovakian international called Callum. It's very much like Callum Styles kind of situation. I know he was only Hungarian, but still. Either way, we picked him up from West Bromwich Albion for £18.5 million. He had a release clause. We thought it might have been a relegation release clause, but that actually wasn't, as they'd been relegated many years before and he hadn't been triggered. Now, it may have still been a relegation release clause, but we don't believe that it was. Either way, for £18.5 million to bring in a guy who I believe is like the next Ivan Kravitz, as far as the Segunda Volante goes, he is ticking boxes for me. I love him to death. Now, maybe the finishing could do with a bit of work, but he's got that amazing passing and vision. Even his marking and positioning aren't too bad either. He's got incredible mental ability for someone who's only 22. His physicals are pretty solid, if not spectacular. Doesn't like big matches, unfortunately, but we didn't know that at the time because you don't find that out till the player's 22. Does have quite a high competitive streak, but I genuinely believe a player of this kind of quality surely has to have insane PA if the game is still telling us that there's a lot of room for him to improve. And I would love to see what he can do when he does improve. It's kind of crazy that he's only got 7 caps, actually. I am mega excited about him. The fact that he's already worth 3 times what we paid when we've paid 18 million quid for him versus Ben Wagstaff. He joined us on a free transfer from Manchester United. Now, of course, we don't need any more wing backs, but when an opportunity comes to bring this guy on a free transfer, we've loaned him to Atletico Madrid. The aim is that we could sell him this summer for 50 million pounds. If we could get like even 40 for Ben Wagstaff this summer, it would just finance yet more of these crazy signings I want to do. He does have that wonderful like top elite club agility and balance though, so that is really quite a crucial thing. But still, really happy with him as a signing. Got him out on loan too, which is perfect. We also then made what I would consider to be a little bit of a mistake. £15 million on 21-year-old Fabrizio, because he's quite a match engine player, but we have overpaid. He does have an international cap for Brazil. I think he's a good match engine player, but we can find guys like this for like £1 to £2 million often in other South American leagues or Africa, or even some Eastern European leagues actually. So paying 15 million was a little bit of a rush of blood to the head, to be honest. We then also signed this guy, Ibrahim Nashnosh, mostly because of his name and because Libyan, and he had a little bit of potential about him. But the other thing is, he actually made it onto the next gen list this year. So bear in mind, he's not even really played for us, of course, because why would he? But we signed him for £37,000, and to see him get on the next gen list, I was very impressed. Now, some of that could have come from his time at Al Hilal Benghazi, but either way, interesting. We weren't done with the big signings though, as we then dropped 16 million on Bruno Batista from Palmeiras, because with Padilla being 34 years old, his physicals are declining at an alarming rate. We knew that he wasn't going to be able to cut it as our main AP this year, and we needed another guy that could really do that role, despite the fact we had 2 youngsters coming through. When the opportunity came to sign Bruno Batista, we took it with open arms. I think next year we'll probably see more out of him, but either way, even if we do end up in a position where we have to sell him, we could probably still double our money. Is he wanted by Saudi? Go on, lad. Yes! I suspect you'll end up seeing the start of the next video me going, so we sold Bruno, and I then decided to do something incredibly financially irresponsible, which was to break our transfer record on bringing back an old favourite. It's nice to have so much money in the bank that we can quite literally make vanity transfers like Seydou Kwasi Awour and bring him back to Sirens, the club that gave him his start in European football. He was here for 8 years before he forced that move to Manchester City, though we did get a record £126 million for that transfer, which is still our transfer record as far as sales anyway. And basically I'd heard rumours, because I've had him on the shortlist ever since he left, just in the hopes that we could bring him back one day, that he was going to move to Liverpool. We put a bid in for £31 million. It's going to rise to 37. He is technically our highest paid player as well. It was a bad financial decision for us because he hasn't really played that much this year. Actually hasn't managed even a single goal for us, but he's 34. But either way, it was just nice to have Kwasi back home in Malta. And that actually wrapped up our transfers. It was quite a lot of them, as you'll see. Some of them for the future. Some of them have definitely got time to come in now, like Callum Brooks, for example, is definitely going to be making an impact in the near future, as has Batista, of course. Now, I just wanted to highlight a couple of players that Hamren have signed this season, because they've dropped nearly 15 million on 2 separate players. The first was this guy, Adebayo Okeke from Chelsea for £14 million. But when you've got Hamren signing Chelsea hot prospects for this kind of money, it shows you how far Malta has come overall, and I'm very, very pleased with that. He hasn't played actually that much for them this season, but I think that is more one for the future. And speaking of, we actually got a chance to look at some FN25 leaks live on stream. Brand new FN25 leaks? What, as in brand new ones that aren't the ones we already know about? Let's have a look. I don't know what I expected. I swear these are spring onions, by the way. I'm convinced those are spring onions. But there was one other signing that was made by Hamron, and that was, oh, dearie me, the £13 million signing of Eder Joffre, who I thought was going to play loads for them. When he signed for them, he was worth a lot of money, and they've barely played him this season. Hasn't played in the Champions League at all for them, and has not started a single league game, which is genuinely concerning that they would spend that kind of money on a guy that isn't playing, particularly when he's this good. As for the league, things were a little different this year. We actually won the league by 20 points, which is a rarity for us. It's usually less than 10, and it's sometimes even closer than that, honestly. But this year was just a different kettle of fish for us. There was something about the depth that we've now created that means that we can rotate the squad and still be comfortable. Very annoying, though. We were this close to getting a flawless season. I've never had one in any of my Building a Nation saves, every game season in the league. And it was a 2-2 draw against Sweetie where they had 2 shots on target. That was what cost us it in the end. But 20 points to win it by. Very, very good. Hamron, Sweetie, and Birkikara getting into the top 4 as well, which is good for us, because I'd rather have Birkikara in the Champions League than Gudja, because I believe Gudja are way better in the Europa. Birkikara could do anything. Zabar, you'll note, didn't get into Europe at all this season, after being in the Champions League last year. They actually sacked Hadrian midway through the season with them in relegation trouble. So, yeah, the downside for us, really, is the fact that Slima and Valletta are going to be in Europe for this next season. That could be a disaster, really. And also, Gazida survived on the final day. We were in real danger of losing a team that we really didn't want to lose. We couldn't afford to lose Tarshin, Balsan, or Gazida United. Nashar we could afford to lose, even though they were in the European places at like halfway through the season. They and Luta go down with a really bad season. Reynoso, 25 goals, Babasi, 14 assists. But now, a little stat for you about Babasi, which I don't think I've ever seen before. He won Defender of the Year in the league, which is not particularly unusual, but it showed that he'd played 14 appearances. But what it also showed is that he'd kept 14 clean sheets. This man, literally, every single game that Foya Babasi has played, we have kept a clean sheet in the league. He's not conceded a single goal in a match that he has played in the league this season, which is over half the matches he's played in. That is ridiculous. And that includes playing in games that have our backup goalkeeper playing as well, because even our goalkeeper's only kept 12 clean sheets, our main guy anyway. And that is why we only conceded 7 goals over the course of the whole season, which is a joint record. And Sweetie were the only team that scored multiple times against us this year. As for the second tier, Melita and Floriana come back up. Dingley nearly come up by 1 point. They so nearly got promoted, and it would have been the dream. I really want to get that happen at some point. Melita's goal difference, by the way, is insane, but not as insane as Peter Hotspur's down at the bottom. Minus 91 in 30 games. They conceded 107 goals in 30 matches. They're conceding over 3 a game. I think they lost multiple games by 9-0 over the course of this season, which is genuinely crazy. And also, shout out to Melita for scoring 104 times. They'll probably still get relegated next year, let's be honest. So with all that in mind, it's time to move on to us in Europe. Now, of course, we'd won the Champions League last year, and we wanted to do it again. I really wanted 4 Champions League wins in 5 years. Just the one little blip that I feel we could have done even better with. This year, I felt we were in a great spot. After what had happened last year and how dominant we'd been, I really felt that we could just do that and then some this year. And we started off pretty damn well. 1-0 victory at home against Bayern Munich. We were kind of struggling at times as Reynoso was generally having quite a poor game, but then who should come off the bench but Jose Pugliese to get one of those very crucial substitute goals to give us a great start. We had a pretty easy run, I would say, in the group stage this year in terms of the teams, and getting the first win against one of the big sides was really, really important. An injury to Padilla, though, was sort of the beginning of the end of his time as our starter in that role this year. It really has been a case of me going, you know what, screw it. He's not going to be able to do this role. We're going to rotate between Batista and then Shirabadi Hajarowan, our young Thai guy. And eventually the Thai guy won out and has actually become our starter for the rest of the season. You'll see him develop over the course of the year. We'll talk about him more later, though. We then followed that up with an absolute clapping of RB Leipzig. They did score their only shot their only shot of the game. Because, of course, it's FN24, and this is just what happens. Batista did give us the lead. Gudmundsson added a second one. We should have won this game very, very comfortably, but, of course, they did score their only shot. Now, as you can see, it was a very good chance. It was literally a tap-in, but it is still annoying. You can see when you just stop them having shots at all, and they still score. But there you go. 2-1 victory, 6 points out of 6. Good start. Then things got even better for us. A 4-1 victory away at Young Boys. 2 goals for Facundo Pereira, 1 for Ivan Kravitz, 1 for Uri Lahovi. Just really good performance. Paez's own goal did get them back into it. They actually played better against us than Leipzig did in many ways, but it was great to just get 3 wins out of 3, already get a couple of good home victories in there, and yeah, 9 points on the board. Great. Then he had Galatasaray next. So naturally, this happened. We basically did nothing good from an attacking standpoint. 2.48 XG, couldn't manage to score a goal to save our life. Reynoso just missed every possible chance that came his way, and you can really see that he has massively struggled. He won the Ballon d'Or again, and I genuinely believe that there's like a hangover from winning the Ballon d'Or. When Reynoso won that first Ballon d'Or, he then had a down year. Then Pereira did the exact same thing. Reynoso, of course, won the Ballon d'Or last season, and, well, at this point, you can see he was having a massively poor season again, but to drop points here was very annoying because we deserved the win, and it should have been 12 points out of 12. But then we did get a good result, even if it was a little bit disappointing to not win this one. Reynoso finally does score his first goal in the Champions League this season, as always, assisted by Foa Babesi. Those two are the weirdest partnership ever. Babesi just gets into those positions, drops those balls across the box, and Reynoso just scores. We were genuinely complaining about him as he did this, but then we conceded in the 88th minute. It would have been a massive win for us, but in the end, a draw is a pretty fair result. But, you know, I always take these away draws at the big sides because I feel like in the long run, that's still going to get you pretty deep. As we then got back to winning it yet again, great result away at Benfica, Gudmundsson, and then Jose Pugliese again coming off the bench to replace a Reynoso, who you can see had 1.1 XG in this game by himself before that and had failed to score, and had only managed to get one goal in his first 6 Champions League games. I think he was already up to like 5 XG at this point, and we were really, really worried about him because it was letting us down. It wasn't just him that was underperforming, but a lot of people were. We were still getting the results, apart from against Galatasaray, but we were scoring less goals than we should be, really. And then we had this. I don't know what to say. 3.1 XG, and we concede literally their only shot on target in the entire game, and they only had 2 shots. It was their first shot of the game, and they only had one like header from a corner later in the game, I believe, after that. It's just one of these games. Again, you can see Reynoso didn't have as much to do in this game, admittedly, but just a crazy performance that we really probably arguably could have won every game up to this point. So the Galatasaray one was hard enough to take. This one was a real sickener to lose at home to RB Salzburg. Just... yeah, I don't know how we managed to do this, but this has been a real problem for us this year, just not taking our chances, and Reynoso's been responsible for a lot of that. He's not the only one. As you can see, Hajaroen played this game and didn't have a great game either. Just a real problem for us. Just a real shame. Luckily, at the very least, we still made up for it in our final game against Nice, the team that we actually beaten in the Super Cup last year, 6-0. But yeah, a 5-0 victory. Reynoso finally comes back. The fun thing about this is he scores a hat-trick, but he got it directly off of exactly 3 XG, so he was still on the money. We won 5-0 and still underperformed. It's genuinely astonishing that was possible, but Gudmundsson and Hajaroen grabbing the other goals here. But it was nice to see Reynoso just be able to score. So at least he went into the knockouts having scored 4 times in the group stage, but still not doing a particularly brilliant job, if you ask me. The question is whether that got us top 8, because that isn't going to get us top of the league, unfortunately, is it? And the answer is yes, it actually did, and much closer to it than you would have expected. Actually 3rd in the end. If we'd have just had even slightly better results, like the ones we should have got, we'd have easily won this group. But that's just how things go. Only lost it by 2 points to Man United in the end. If we'd have literally just beaten Galatasaray or something and got a draw against Red Bull Salzburg, for crying out loud, we'd have won it, but that's just how things go. But that's enough about us. We did only concede 4 goals though, which is very impressive. Scrolling further down though, you'll notice both Sweetie and Hamren got into the knockouts for the 2nd season in a row. Hamren did it on goal difference by virtue of Atletico beating Roma by 2-0 on the final match day, meaning that their goal difference dropped to become 2 worse than Hamren. 1 worse than Hamren's from 1 better, and that was enough to send them through. It's also worth shouting out Sweetie though, who did beat Benfica on the final match day to get their qualification sorted. So 10 points for them, 9 points for Hamren, more points for Malta. Unfortunately, Zabar were a bit of a different kettle of fish. 8 played, 8 losses. This is part of the reason why why Hadrian was sacked at Zabar, mostly because of the league performances, but they just had a woeful season. And I really hope that Hikara can do a little bit better than that next season, because if they just had like a Goodyear-esque year where they get 6 or 7 points, it's just more coefficient. But we really do need to get to the stage now where we're starting to see all 3 of them qualify. At the very least, getting Hamren and Sweetie to back-to-back knockouts is very crucial. Now, we'll talk about who they faced in a minute, but let's talk about us first, as we of course got a bye through to the round of 16, where we would face off against Inter, and had a very disappointing first leg. Reynoso did at least manage to score both the goals, but Michel Bizarma naturally scored against his former side. Mikel Brunner got one for them as well. Very even game, completely deserved. Inter just got some really good chances and were able to take them, but I felt confident with an away draw, but it was Inter, which did worry me because I thought we should be winning there, really. Luckily, in the second leg, we made no mistake, and Reynoso finally returned to the Reynoso that we've come to know and love with a hat-trick against Inter. He actually scored all 5 goals against them here, and all of a sudden had rocketed up because he's got 3 against Nice, then 5 against Inter in those 2 games. He'd scored 8 in his last 3 Champions League games, and all of a sudden, it was back to old school Reynoso, and we were through to the quarterfinals, but we would play Real Madrid in the quarterfinal. Then it got even worse for us as we had this performance, a 2-2 draw. We were actually losing in the first half. It was not a penalty, just one of those things. Hajaroen then scored, then another one from Reynoso gave us a lead, and we were bombing forward at this point, really trying to get those goals. Then just a long-range shot from the edge of the box gave Real Madrid a 2-2, and I hate drawing these home games when you've got that away game to go, because we are generally speaking just worse away, unless we can pull off those boring Sirens performances, which is exactly exactly what we did. Pereira's goal in the 4th minute, Peters with the whipped cross to the back post, great header from him, we dominated them. I don't think they had a shot in this game until like the 83rd minute or something. We were absolutely flawless here and thoroughly deserved the win to go through to the semi-finals where we would face off against Barcelona, just going through all the teams that we'd beaten in finals before. But unfortunately, they had other plans for us. We went behind through Ben Yard, then Facundo Pereira, identical goal again. Peters, back post cross, Pereira was there, but then Abubakar Thiam gave Barca the lead back again in a game that I think we were the better side, or at the very least deserved to get a draw from, and I was worried going back to the home game with a loss. Even though it's only by 1 goal, we also had no Babesi for this game, so Zimmer had to step in, which definitely didn't help. But we knew that we'd have to actually win this game and play well. And my God, did we cut this one fine. Pereira gave us the lead. He then grabbed another one. He's been so damn good in these late-stage knockout matches. But then Pablo, with Barcelona, one of their few chances in this entire game, got them level on the night to take it 3-3, and then to extra time. And then on penalties, it was our boy, Frederick Björk-Solton, that saved 2 penalties in the shootout, and we managed to win it by 6-5 to reach a Champions League final for the 4th time in 5 years. But we would play Manchester United in that final. I feel like I'm not really spoiling too much by saying that Hamron and Sweetie didn't get to the final, because that would be mad. And believe me, if they had been, I would have been talking about them first. But Man United are the only team that we've lost the Champions League final to in this save. And unfortunately, that is still the case. Sirens 1, Manchester United 2. Krustev, our former player, who I'd sold to Saudi a couple of years ago, he came back to Europe. I tried to sign him. He wanted £500,000 a week to sign for us. 2 days later, signs for United on 125. What is that about? Needless to say, though, Ferber Basie, of all people, threw us back into the game after half an hour, but then Dom Baker, literally the head of communications for SI, which I just find funny to me, scored the winning goal for them. I think it was a header as well, which is very annoying. A very, very even game. United just came out slightly on top. Frustrating, really. I think over the course of this year, we've still been one of the best sides in Europe, and this was just one of those things where on the night, it just wasn't quite us. We couldn't get enough control of the football for whatever reason. Just wasn't our day. We still did a bloody good job overall, but that means that we have now lost 2 consecutive Champions League finals to Manchester United when we've played them, and I really want to win against them in a final at some point, but unfortunately it was not to be. So the question is, what happened to Hamron and Sweetie that of course led to them not being in the final? So Sweetie would play off against Marseille, and Hamron would get a chance to play against Milan. And in the first game, Hamron actually did get a draw against Milan with that red card though, and I felt that, you know, with it being the home game, that's your chance to win. Sweetie, on the other hand, took full advantage of their chance to win, with Oscar Crisanto giving them a 1-0 victory over Marseille to see if they could actually get through a round, which would be incredible. And then they did exactly that, with Oscar Crisanto winning the game for them in Marseille. They won both home and away in a knockout round, and then went through to the quarterfinals. Round of 16. Brilliant. Hamron, on the other hand, couldn't quite do it in the second leg, with Kieran Warner, our former player, who I actually think might have been on loan. No, he was on loan at Birkirkara, doing the business for them, but at least Sweetie had managed to progress around, and it's just more points. Unfortunately, they would play Liverpool, and, well, lost 2-1. They did actually equalise in this game, after they'd taken an early lead, Liverpool, but Haaland, in the end, gave Liverpool the win. Then in the second leg, they did what they always do, and play very, very well at Anfield. They got a draw at Anfield. This is not the first time they've managed to survive defeat at Anfield, with Crisanto yet again scoring the goal. He made the next gen list at number 1, and he deserved it too. To only go out 3-2 to a side like Liverpool, it really does give me hope about what Hamron and Sweetie are building there. And I think those two, it's only a matter of time, I think, before one of them has a cracking group stage and finally gets top 16 or something. It feels doable, and it's exciting to me. So you know about Hamron, Sweetie, and Zabar, but the less said about them, the better. But what about Birkirkara, Gazira United, and of course, Gudja United, who are in the Europa League? Well, pretty bloody well, if you ask me. Gudja, 3rd in the Europa League. They've always disappointed us in the Champions League. We think it's because of the tactics that their manager employs, but it seems to work brilliantly for them in the Europa. Only missed out on winning the group due to goal difference in the end. Had a couple of defeats in there. The one that really irks me was the FK Sarajevo defeat. They should not be losing to them. Did get 6 wins though. I mean, Orbi, PSV Eindhoven away, Anderlecht away, Crvena Zvezda away. They beat Genk as well. 4 away wins is very, very impressive. They won every single away game. It's insane. Birkirkara, on the other hand, down in 14th, but it's still top half. It's still solid from them. It's exactly what you'd expect. They lost to Spurs, Sporting, and Dinamo Kiev, which is a little bit disappointing. Got a draw against Olympiacos, but it was away. Did get some good results at home against Espanyol, though. Beat Honka, as you'd expect. Smashed Hajduk Split, which is nice to see, and FCSB as well. So good results there. Solid enough for them. Of course, that meant Gudja got a bye through to the round of 16, and Birkirkara would have to face off against one of the teams from the bottom half. And would you believe it? It was Spurs. This is the 2nd season in a row that Birkirkara have had to play one of the sides that arguably should be in the Champions League. Now, admittedly, Spurs are all the way down here, but you know what that means when it's an English side. It means nothing. Unfortunately, it went about as well as you'd expect. A 2-0 defeat in the home game. We tried all of our might to give the Quantum Spursiness something to chance to happen, but it didn't. In the second leg, they did at least get a draw, but it meant they went down swinging, I suppose. Got a coefficient point on the way out, but I don't know. I just want them to have a good run, and they can't do that. But I suppose if you're going to be the best, you've got to beat the best. But it's just disappointing to see them draw Inter and Tottenham in back-to-back seasons. But we still had Gudja, and they would at least get the chance to play against Midtjylland, and managed to get themselves a nice little draw away from home, albeit a slightly underwhelming performance where they actually had to rely on an own goal, but they still played well. And in the second leg, massively made up for it. Actually underperformed their XG in this game. DiPinto and Dominguez, who is now... Goodyear actually have a pairing of Tabacado and John Dominguez now, who's now got a Spain cap, where they faced off against a relatively strong Dinamo Kiev side. Not that it mattered, as they won 3-0 away from home with Dominguez grabbing a goal and 2 for Tabacado. Those two were carrying Goodyear. They really are such a potent strike force. And in the second leg, they made it even better for themselves. 2-0 victory, 5-0 on aggregate, DiPinto and Dominguez with the goals, but this would then set up a semi-final against Newcastle, I believe. And then this happened. Antalyaspor 3, Tottenham 1, but then Goodyear 3, Newcastle 0. Samaka van der Velde, another striker they've got, and Dominguez grabbing the goals to surely put them in a position to reach a Europa League final. And we were so excited, particularly at the prospect of a potentially them playing against Antalyaspor. And then this happened. I just have no words. 7-1 on the night after extra time. And it was one of these games as well where Newcastle, I think, only created like 2.1 XG, but when it's going to knock you out, you're going to get knocked out. The fact that Spurs won on penalties as well against Antalyaspor, I was really hoping for a Goodyear Antalyaspor final, or just even Goodyear versus Tottenham. Just something. So then what of Gazira United? They do what they do best. They won the group. The last 2 times that Gazira United have been in the Conference League, they have won the group. They got to the final last time they won the group as well, which is incredible. Did it in the end on goal difference, which was fantastic, ironically over one of our affiliate sites, but you'd love to see it. 5 wins on the board. Scoopy, RZ, Ralm away from home, Dinamo Minsk, and Antwerp with that home win. The only defeat they had was against FC Twente, which was really surprising because they're all the way down here, but life goes on, I suppose. They got it on goal difference. Literally 1 less goal conceded than Domžale was all it took. I don't know what the tiebreaker would have been if they'd actually conceded another goal, because they had identical records. And then had the unfortunate situation of losing the first leg away at 22nd place Norgeland. Shout out as well to Linfield though. And then in the second leg, balls it up even more. They were brilliant in both games, just couldn't score their goals and were knocked out by they win the group and then get knocked out by the 22nd place team. Disappointing as all hell. But shout out to Linfield, by the way, who you'll see here, knocked out Partizan in the quarterfinals, went all the way to the semis, where eventually they did lose 9-2 to Lazio, but Linfield in the semi-finals. How cool is that? But unfortunately, that did mean that we didn't get any titles this season, but still, 18.357. It's actually our best season ever with 7 teams in Europe. So you can see again, the 7 teams in Europe progress thing is actually progressing. It just doesn't look like it because of the way that Zabar played and the fact that nobody won anything this season. But it is still moving in the right direction, but it's just doing it too slowly for us to have any reasonable chance of catching England currently. Because, of course, next season we lose that 27-point year. As things stand, we've actually extended our gap this season over the teams below us to a full 4 points this season over Spain, because France have had an absolutely woeful season. So it does keep us fairly comfortable in there. However, we are going to lose a lot of ground over these sides, and I think next year it might genuinely be a case of trying to hang on to top 4, which is fine, because at the end of the day, if you're in the top 4, you're in the hunt. We just have to hope that we can do some miracles. England putting down a 26-point season as well. It's just terrifying, really, isn't it? It's so difficult to catch them. But we're going to keep going and keep trying to make it happen, because I genuinely feel like Malta, as you can see, is still moving in the right direction. Now, to the youth intake. I'm just kidding. We don't actually do youth intakes anymore. We don't even really produce youth players. We did actually win Best Academy in the world, though. Haven't produced any players, but apparently we have a really good academy. So that's fun. Stats-wise, it's been a wild year. Reynoso, 43 goals. Literally his best season ever for us, despite the fact he only had 12 goals at Christmas. His second half of the year, he netted 31 times, including getting 7 in a single league game against Luto, which we won 12-0, admittedly. But still, but basically got 6 assists in that game too. What a season from him. Despite having that poor start, especially in Europe, he actually won the Champions League's Golden Boot as well. So out of nowhere, he's just rocketed back up the form tables, which is great. But you can see, Hajarouen stepped in brilliantly in place of Bodilla this season, and I've really been impressed with this youngster. He's still only 20 years old, but he's nowhere near the technical level of Padilla. In fact, they're not even in the same postcode. That's the problem. But he still managed to contribute, 15 goals and 7 assists, but it's just not the levels that we'd see out of Padilla. He's operating just under his XG, but he's still getting the XG, which is great, but we need a little bit more out of him, and I don't know if we're ever going to really get that, which is why Batista's important. Kravets was goated this year, though. 14 goals, still only just overperformed. Pugliese was brilliant. Pereira underperformed his XG. So did Tesco's Express. That's the kind of thing I'm on about. We have just had a lot of players that have just been underperforming. Look at Peters, 8 XG. And he only got 4 goals. That's a lot, actually. He's not even taking set pieces. He's just missing chances. It's cost us. We actually underperformed our XG by 10 goals in the Champions League this season alone. The league, it was a bit different, but that's just a huge amount. And hopefully that's more of a blip than anything else, which means that we got to the final in a season where we were underperforming. So I'm pretty pleased with that. Next year, I hope that we won't underperform, though. As for the assist side of things, Babasi, in the end, managed to get 22 assists. And Peters with 17 as well. Those two have just been astonishingly good. I feel a little bit bad for Uri Lahovi, honestly. He's only 32. He's not going anywhere anytime soon, but he has been sort of put into somewhat of a backseat role this year. But still, 24 assists between them is incredibly good numbers. I think it's actually identical to last year still. We really like that out of them. Another player I do want to highlight, though, is Hans Zimmer. our right wing back replacement that sort of covers when we need Babasi to drop out a little bit. Played a few more games this season, 8 assists. The one thing about him is that he's never going to be the best defensive player. He only has 7 tackling. His marking and positioning are okay, but that is always going to be a bit of a letdown for him. He is very much a player that we play when we want forward-thinking, attacking kind of football. He's underperformed his XA, but he has got a lot of it, which is certainly encouraging. He's only 23, which I think actually makes him the same age as Babasi as it happens, but he is world-class apparently. Or is that his potential? Potential to be world-class, which is ideal. Consistent, big matches. There's a lot to like about Mr. Zimmer, and I hope that he continues to develop. Because as you can see, he's already gone up 3 in marking, 3 in positioning, even getting a bit of balance, which is nice. And he has really nice acceleration and agility to begin with. Unfortunately, he did have an injury here, which cost his stamina a little bit, but it has recovered. Actually, another player that's underperformed massively is Callum Brooks. 5 XG for 1 goal. That's mad. And just to show you how we've mainly lined up this season, it's mostly been Reynoso Hajarawan over the majority of the season in the end. Pereira with Jose Otavio and Kravitz after the injury to Gillet, but he didn't get his place back once he returned anyway. But Basie, Peters, Gudmundsson, Paez, and Vieira with Chosen One, as we've been calling him, as the sort of backup option. But like, imagine having him as a backup. Like, we are privileged. Let me tell you, friends, we are privileged. As for the multinational team, they're actually up to a new high of 109th in the world. I think they might genuinely manage to get top 100 at some point. Alex Neil's still in charge, and that's mostly due to the Nations League. Now, you can see their World Cup qualifiers not going amazingly so far, but they have got at least a draw in there against Latvia. Nations League, however, was a very different story, as they did in the end end up actually coming second to Finland this time. If they could have just done away with a couple of these draws, like maybe if they'd beaten Montenegro and Estonia instead, they could have been a lot closer to Finland. But this is good because it's showing the idea that they could maybe start to challenge for a potential promotion to Nations League B, which is exciting, and they are starting to get a few more players declaring for Malta, which is awesome. As for the loan farm, we're actually dead on 0. 0 players out on loan. Who would have thunk it? That actually means 256 if you've not watched this before. So we do have a lot of players out on loan still. I really want to find loans for Dedemar and a good loan for Mr. Amadou Drame, who has played a lot. Wait, really? No, he hasn't. That must be, non-competitive games. I tried to find him alone. He's done several, but he hasn't actually managed to find any football, which is really disappointing because it's tough with goalkeepers. Because teams claim they're going to play them as a regular starter or whatever, and they just don't. So that's a real issue. We really need to find him a proper loan. But either way, now here's the loans. I mean, we actually have now a 4.5-star player out on loan. It was obviously going to be someone like Pedro Figueira, but it is genuinely astonishing how this man is still willing to be out on loan at Goodger United. And he's part of the reason why they were able to go so far in the Europa League, because he's worth £90 million and has 30 caps for Portugal, yet he's happy being on loan in the Europa League. And he's not the only one. Look at this. Goodyear also have Dominguez and Tabakaru. Tabakaru, I know I show him a lot, but look at the state of this man. He's banged 23 goals this season. He's worth a fortune as well. He's arguably the second best striker at the club. Him and Pugliese are pretty much on a par with each other. I would say possibly Tabakaru's better, but they're still brilliant. Not to mention they've also got John Dominguez, who they can operate without wide as well. It's just crazy, the players they've got. But the top scorer out on loan was actually Felix Anderson of Floriano with 26 this season, but Burai Petrascu was actually the top scorer, I believe, in the second tier. Anderson got a lot of goals in the cup for them, but 23 goals for him. Tabakaru with 23 as well. Neira with 22 and 14 assists is insane. Just really, really good numbers all round. Roy Fleming actually spent the season on loan at Fulham in the Premier League and banged 17 goals for them, which is really, really nice for him. I sent him on loan to Fulham mostly because I'm a Fulham fan and we just didn't want to have him complaining about a lack of football, so I thought he would live my dream. As for the budgets, we have a £414 million transfer budget. This might be the biggest transfer budget I've ever had in FM at any stage. We still can't spend all of it because obviously that would literally put us in the hole. We have a decent safety net. Oh wow, that doesn't even make sense. There's no way we could be 400 over when we haven't made that much profit. Either way, we do still have a nice FFP profit, and I think this summer we could genuinely break our transfer record a couple of times, and I kind of intend to because it's fun, really, and that's what we're going to be doing over on stream right now. I could see us dropping 50-60 million pounds on more than one player over the course of this summer, and I think that's kind of an exciting prospect because we're finally in a position now where, I mean, look, we made 75 million profit last season, 100 million this year. It's really, really good for us, and that's going to allow us a lot of signings and now actually be on the red for a year. We could literally lose 100 million next season overall and still be totally fine on FFP, and I think this might be the summer that I feel like splashing the cash. I've got my eye on a couple of guys that are a little bit crazy expensive, honestly. So the aim for season 27, I think we might actually be able to get to season 30 genuinely. If we're, doing the Champions League finals in the same stream that we get to them, we're doing the first 6 Champions League games in one stream instead of 2. I think there's a chance we could get to season 30 between now and late November. So that's kind of an exciting prospect. I don't know if we'll ever be able to catch England, but I think season 30 is very much on the cards. We might see some of these youngsters start to take over a little bit, which is exciting. The plan is we got to win the Champions League again next year. That's all we really can do. I think this team now, barring any kind of silliness, is basically strong enough to reach the final every year if we don't get any kind of ridiculously bad luck with injuries or just weird stuff happens in the game sometimes. But generally speaking, we should be okay. We just need the other teams to start doing some stuff. Like, we need Goodger get into the semi-finals or finals of the Europa League next season. We need Big Hikara not getting drawn against Spurs or Inter. We need, well, I guess in this case it'd be Valletta, who admittedly, of all the top flight sides, all 14 of them, Valletta are the only side that's currently in the top flight that have never played in Europe in this save. Obviously they have in the past, but not in this save. So that's going to be a bit intriguing. Slima do worry me a lot because they're rubbish, and we could have a real problem there. But you never know. Maybe Valletta will surprise us all. I'm hoping they'll take some loads. Who knows? So anyway, join us over on stream. We'll be doing a lot of stuff. We'll also doing the Club World Cup because we're in that again. We get to play against like Peñarol and Toronto FC in our group, which is going to be really fun. I reckon we should be able to win that because they never take it seriously, and we always do because we're proper tryhards. But anyway, like and subscribe if you're new. I'll see you guys very, very soon. Hold your gun. Capybara. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.